Why people stop respecting you and you never notice it.
Have you ever noticed that people don't interrupt certain individuals? They don't ignore their messages. They don't make jokes at their expense. They don't casually cross their boundaries. And yet those people are rarely the loudest in the room. They're not the richest. They're not the most attractive. So what makes the difference? Here's something uncomfortable to consider. Respect is rarely something people take from you overnight. More often, it's something you slowly teach them to stop giving you. It happens so quietly that you don't even realize it's happening. One ignored opinion, one broken promise, one apology for something that wasn't your fault, one compromise too many. Until one day, you notice something has changed. People interrupt you without hesitation. They dismiss your ideas before you finished speaking. They ask for favors but disappear when you need help. And somehow, despite everything you've done for them, you feel invisible. The frightening part isn't that respect disappears, it's that the process is almost always invisible while it's happening. Because respect isn't built by what you say about yourself, it's built by the patterns people repeatedly experience when they're around you. Today's video uncovers the hidden psychological behaviors that quietly cause people to lose respect, and why most people never notice until the damage has already been done. If you understand these patterns, you'll never look at your relationships the same way again. Respect is one of the least understood forms of human currency. People often believe respect comes from status, money, intelligence, or popularity. But social psychology paints a different picture. Human beings constantly evaluate one another, not consciously, but automatically. Every interaction becomes information. Every conversation updates someone's internal opinion of you. Every boundary you defend, every promise you keep, every standard you tolerate, slowly builds the story people tell themselves about your value. That's why respect rarely disappears after one mistake. It erodes through repetition. Just as a mountain isn't destroyed by one drop of rain, your social value isn't lost through one awkward moment. It's lost through repeated behaviors that quietly communicate how you expect to be treated. And here's the surprising part. Many of these behaviors are disguised as kindness, as patience, as being understanding, as avoiding conflict. Which is why so many genuinely good people eventually find themselves surrounded by people who no longer appreciate them. Today, we're exposing 10 of the biggest psychological reasons this happens, and more importantly, how to stop it before it becomes your identity. Let's begin.
Number 1. You reward disrespect instead of responding to it. Imagine this. A friend constantly arrives 30 minutes late. The first time, you laugh it off. The second time, you tell yourself they're just busy. By the 10th time, you're rearranging your entire schedule around someone who clearly doesn't value your time. You never complained. You never addressed it. You simply adapted. From your perspective, you are being patient. From their perspective, you are communicating something entirely different. You are teaching them that your time has no consequences. Psychologists call this reinforcement. When a behavior produces no meaningful negative outcome, the brain assumes it's acceptable. The person isn't necessarily trying to disrespect you. They're simply learning what they can get away with. Human behavior naturally follows the path of least resistance. If ignoring your needs never cost them anything, why would they change? This doesn't only happen with lateness. It happens when someone constantly interrupts you, when they borrow money and never repay it, when they speak to you harshly and receive nothing but another chance. Each time, your silence becomes permission, not because you intended it to, but because human beings learn more from repeated consequences than spoken expectations. This is why emotionally intelligent people don't confuse kindness with unlimited tolerance. Kindness cares. Tolerance without limits teaches, and sometimes what it teaches is that your boundaries don't matter. The lesson is simple but powerful. You don't earn respect by accepting every behavior. You earn it by calmly showing people where the line is. Not through anger, not through revenge, just through consistency. Because every boundary you fail to defend eventually becomes a standard people expect from you.
2. You need everyone to like you. There's a hidden trap that many people mistake for being a good person. It's called people-pleasing. At first glance, it seems admirable. You're always available, always agreeable,
always saying yes, always trying to avoid disappointing anyone. But beneath the surface lies an invisible psychological cost. The more desperately someone seeks approval, the less valuable that approval becomes. Think about the people you've respected most in your own life. Were they constantly trying to impress everyone? Probably not. They were polite, respectful, compassionate, but they weren't afraid to disappoint people when necessary, because they understood something many people never learn. Respect and approval are not the same thing. Approval is given for making others comfortable. Respect is earned by remaining true to your values, even when it's uncomfortable. Imagine a manager who never says no to employees. Every request is approved, every deadline is extended, every mistake is overlooked. At first, everyone loves working for them. But over time, something changes. Rules lose meaning. Expectations disappear. Authority quietly dissolves. Ironically, the very desire to be liked destroys the respect that leadership requires. The same principle applies to friendships, relationships, families, even strangers. When people sense that you'll abandon your own needs simply to keep them happy, they unconsciously begin valuing your opinions less, not because they're cruel, but because confidence signals stability, and stability creates trust. Social psychologists have long observed that people naturally place greater value on individuals who possess clear internal standards rather than constantly adjusting themselves to satisfy everyone around them. This doesn't mean becoming cold or difficult. It means understanding that saying no doesn't make you selfish. It makes your yes meaningful. Because a person who says yes to everything eventually stands for nothing. And people instinctively recognize that.
3. You constantly explain and justify yourself. Have you ever caught yourself giving a 5-minute explanation for a decision that only required one sentence? Maybe you declined an invitation, but immediately began listing every reason why. Maybe you set a boundary, then spent the next 10 minutes trying to convince the other person that you weren't being selfish. Or perhaps someone questioned your choices, and instead of simply standing by them, you felt an overwhelming need to prove that you were right. Most people think this makes them appear reasonable. In reality, it often communicates uncertainty. Imagine two colleagues at work. One says, "I'm unable to stay late today. I'll continue this tomorrow morning." The other says, "I'm so sorry. I really wish I could stay, but I have a family commitment, and I've been exhausted lately. I hope you understand. I feel terrible." Both declined the request, but they created two very different impressions. The first person communicated confidence. The second unintentionally communicated that their decision required permission. This isn't about being rude. It's about understanding how people interpret confidence. Psychologists describe this through the concept of self-validation. People who trust their own judgment don't constantly seek external approval for every decision they make. They understand that not everyone will agree, and that's perfectly acceptable. Ironically, the more you over-explain, the more opportunities you give others to challenge your reasoning. Instead of respecting your decision, they begin negotiating with your excuses. "Can't you just move your plans? It'll only take a few minutes. You've done it before." Notice what happened. The conversation shifted from respecting your boundary to debating your explanation. People don't always question your reasons because they're manipulative. Sometimes they're simply responding to the uncertainty they hear. When your words suggest that your decision is negotiable, many people will naturally treat it that way. The lesson is simple. Not every decision needs a courtroom defense. You don't have to justify protecting your time. You don't have to apologize for having priorities. And you certainly don't need everyone to agree with your choices before they're allowed to exist. Confidence is often quiet. It doesn't argue. It doesn't over-explain. It simply stands by what it knows is right. The next time you make a decision, resist the urge to convince everyone else that it's reasonable. Trust that a clear answer is often the strongest one.
Number 4.
You don't keep your own standards. One of the fastest ways to lose respect is surprisingly simple. You stop respecting your own commitments. Think about how many promises people make to themselves. I'm going to start exercising on Monday. I'm done tolerating toxic behavior. I'll speak up next time. I'll finally finish that project. Then Monday arrives, nothing changes. The project remains unfinished. The boundary disappears. The promise quietly fades into another forgotten intention. Here's the problem. Every time you break a promise to yourself, you're teaching your own mind that your words don't matter. Over time, this doesn't just affect your self-confidence, it affects how other people perceive you as well. Imagine a friend who is always talking about changing their life. Every month they announce a new goal. Every week they declare a fresh start. But year after year, nothing actually changes. Eventually, people stop taking their words seriously, not because they're bad people, but because consistency has been replaced by empty intention. Human beings naturally judge reliability through patterns, not potential. People don't respect what you hope to become. They respect what you repeatedly demonstrate. This principle extends far beyond personal goals. If you constantly tolerate behavior that violates your values, people begin to question whether those values are genuine. If honesty matters, but you remain silent whenever honesty becomes uncomfortable, your standards lose credibility. If self-respect matters, but you repeatedly accept treatment that contradicts it, others notice the contradiction, and contradictions weaken trust. Emotional intelligence begins with integrity. Integrity means your actions consistently support your words. You don't need to be perfect, nobody is. But when you make a commitment, especially to yourself, treat it as something valuable, because every promise you keep strengthens your identity, and every promise you repeatedly break slowly weakens it. The practical lesson is this: stop making dramatic declarations. Start making small commitments you can actually keep. Wake up when you said you would. Finish what you started. Follow through on the conversations you've been avoiding. Each small act of consistency sends a powerful message to yourself and to everyone around you. This is someone whose words mean something, and people naturally respect those whose actions consistently match what they say.
5. You make yourself too available. Kindness is admirable. Generosity is powerful. Being dependable is a wonderful quality. But when availability has no limits, appreciation often begins to disappear. Picture two friends. The first answers every call immediately, cancels plans whenever someone else needs them, always says no problem, even when it's clearly inconvenient. The second is equally caring, but they protect their time. Sometimes they're unavailable. Sometimes they say, I can't today, but I can help tomorrow. Both are good people, yet over time, one becomes valued more than the other. Why? Because human psychology is deeply influenced by perceived value. Things that are endlessly available often become psychologically invisible. It's the same reason people often overlook what they already have while chasing what seems scarce. This principle quietly affects relationships, friendships, workplaces, and even families. When people know you'll always adjust your life around theirs, they gradually stop recognizing the effort you are making, not necessarily out of malice, but because the extraordinary has become ordinary. Your sacrifice has become expected. Imagine an employee who constantly volunteers for extra work. At first, everyone is grateful. Months later, those extra tasks are no longer seen as favors. They're seen as responsibilities. The appreciation fades because the behavior has become predictable. Many people mistake this for being used. Sometimes that's true, but often it's simply human adaptation. People quickly normalize whatever becomes consistent. That's why healthy boundaries are not barriers. They're reminders that your time has value. Emotionally intelligent people understand that protecting their energy doesn't make them selfish. It allows them to give their best without becoming resentful. The goal isn't to become unavailable. The goal is to become intentional. Help because you choose to, not because you're afraid people will leave if you don't. Be generous without abandoning yourself. Support others without sacrificing your own well-being. And remember this: the people who truly respect you won't disappear the first time you say, I can't. In fact, many will respect you more because they now understand that your time, your energy, and your attention are things you value, and people tend to value what you value first.
6. You avoid difficult conversations. For many people, silence feels safer than confrontation. Instead of addressing a problem, they convince themselves that it will eventually disappear. They ignore the disrespectful comment. They pretend the broken promise didn't bother them. They smile through resentment, hoping the other person will somehow realize what they've done. But human behavior rarely works that way. What isn't addressed is often repeated. Imagine the coworker who regularly takes credit for your ideas during meetings. The first time, you tell yourself it isn't worth mentioning. The second time, you decide to avoid creating tension. By the fifth meeting, everyone in the room begins associating your work with someone else's name. The problem didn't grow because the other person became bolder overnight. It grew because your silence gradually became part of the pattern. Social psychology shows that people continuously test social boundaries, sometimes consciously, often unconsciously. When a boundary is never acknowledged, the brain begins to assume it doesn't exist. This doesn't mean every disagreement requires an argument. Quite the opposite. Emotionally intelligent people don't create unnecessary conflict. They simply refuse to let important issues remain unspoken. There's a profound difference between being peaceful and being passive. Peaceful people communicate with clarity. Passive people sacrifice clarity to avoid discomfort. One builds respect. The other quietly erodes it. Think about the strongest relationships in your life. Whether it's a friendship, a marriage, or a professional partnership, trust doesn't grow because conflict never happens. It grows because difficult conversations happen with honesty and respect. The practical lesson is this: don't wait until frustration turns into anger. Address small issues while they're still small. Speak calmly, speak directly. Focus on the behavior, not the person's character. Instead of saying, "You never respect me," say, "When this happened, I felt overlooked. I'd like us to handle it differently." That single shift changes the conversation from blame to understanding. People don't lose respect because you express your concerns. More often, they lose respect because you never do.
Number 7. You react emotionally instead of responding calmly. Imagine two people receiving the exact same criticism. The first immediately raises their voice. They interrupt. They become defensive. Hours later, they're still replaying the conversation, sending emotional messages and trying to prove they were right. The second person pauses. They listen. They ask a few questions. If the criticism is useful, they learn from it. If it's unfair, they address it calmly or walk away. Which person appears stronger? Most people instinctively choose the second, not because they never feel emotion, but because they aren't controlled by it. One of the most powerful principles in emotional intelligence is the ability to separate the feeling from the reaction. Emotions are automatic. Reactions are choices. When people realize they can easily provoke you, they unknowingly gain influence over your emotional state. A sarcastic comment ruins your day. A rude message keeps you awake at night. A stranger's opinion changes your mood. Without realizing it, you've handed other people the controls. This is why calmness is so often mistaken for confidence. It signals emotional stability, and stability creates trust. Think of a respected leader during a crisis. Everyone else is panicking. Voices are rising. Decisions are rushed. Yet the leader remains composed. Their calm doesn't eliminate the problem, but it gives everyone confidence that the problem can be solved. The same principle applies in everyday life. Whether it's a disagreement with a partner, criticism from a colleague, or conflict with a friend, your response often shapes the outcome more than the event itself. This doesn't mean suppressing your emotions. Healthy emotional intelligence isn't pretending nothing hurts. It's acknowledging your feelings without allowing them to dictate your behavior. The next time someone frustrates you, pause before reacting. Ask yourself one simple question: will my next response improve the situation, or simply express my emotion? That brief pause creates space for wisdom, and people naturally respect those who remain steady when others lose control. Because emotional control is not weakness,
It is one of the clearest forms of inner strength.
8. You constantly seek validation from others. There's a subtle habit that quietly drains respect from almost every relationship. It sounds like this. What do you think? Do you think I'm making the right choice? Are you sure this looks okay? Do you think people will like it? Of course, asking for advice isn't the problem. Wise people seek perspective. The problem begins when every decision depends on someone else's approval. Imagine a talented artist who creates beautiful work but refuses to share it until everyone agrees it's good enough. Or a business owner who changes direction every time they hear a different opinion. Or someone who constantly adjusts their personality depending on who they're with. Over time, people stop seeing consistency. Instead, they see uncertainty. Psychologists describe this as an external locus of evaluation, a tendency to measure your worth through the opinions of others instead of your own values. The danger is that validation becomes addictive. Every compliment feels necessary. Every criticism feels devastating. Your confidence rises and falls with someone else's opinion. But opinions are unpredictable. One person admires your ambition. Another calls it arrogance. One person appreciates your honesty. Another finds it intimidating. If your identity depends on pleasing everyone, you'll spend your life chasing a finish line that doesn't exist. Ironically, the people who earn the deepest respect aren't those who ignore feedback. They're the ones who know how to separate feedback from identity. They listen, they reflect, they improve, but they don't abandon themselves in the process. Think about someone you've always admired. Chances are they weren't constantly asking for permission to be themselves. They had values, they had direction, and while they remained open to learning, they didn't allow every outside opinion to redefine who they were. The practical lesson is this: seek advice, but don't surrender your judgment. Listen, but don't lose your voice. Accept constructive criticism, but don't confuse someone else's opinion with your worth. The moment your self-respect depends entirely on external approval, you've handed strangers the power to define your value. And no one can truly respect you more than you're willing to respect yourself.
Now, number 9, you don't respect yourself first. There is a quiet truth about human behavior that many people spend years trying to understand. The respect you receive from others is often influenced by the respect you consistently show yourself. This isn't about arrogance. It isn't about believing you're better than anyone else. It's about the standards you refuse to abandon, even when no one is watching. Imagine someone who constantly speaks negatively about themselves. I'm not good enough. I always mess things up. I'm probably bothering you. At first, people may reassure them. They offer encouragement. They remind them of their strengths. But over time, something begins to change. The reassurance becomes less frequent. The doubt becomes familiar. Eventually, others begin accepting the image that person has repeatedly presented. Human beings naturally absorb the expectations that are consistently communicated. If you repeatedly announce that your opinions don't matter, many people will eventually stop asking for them. If you constantly minimize your achievements, others may begin overlooking them too. This doesn't happen because people are cruel. It happens because confidence is contagious, and so is self-doubt. Social psychology refers to this as self-perception and social signaling. The way you treat yourself becomes information that others unconsciously use to decide how they should treat you. Think about someone who never apologizes for existing. They walk into a room without demanding attention, yet they naturally receive it. They don't boast. They don't seek admiration. They simply carry themselves with quiet certainty. When they speak, they don't rush. When they listen, they're fully present. When they disagree, they do so respectfully, without shrinking. Their confidence isn't loud, it's consistent, and consistency builds credibility. The lesson isn't to become prideful, it's to stop participating in your own disrespect. Speak to yourself with the same dignity you hope to receive from others. Celebrate your progress instead of dismissing it. Protect your peace instead of apologizing for it. Honor your values instead of abandoning them to fit in. Because every act of self-respect quietly teaches the world how to respond to you. And when you value yourself, you're far less likely to accept relationships, conversations, or environments that diminish your worth.
Finally, number 10. You ignore the small signals that respect is fading.
Perhaps the greatest reason people lose respect without realizing it is this: they don't notice the warning signs. Respect almost never disappears in a single dramatic moment. It fades through small, repeated signals. A message that once received an immediate reply now sits unanswered for days. People begin talking over you during conversations. Your opinions are acknowledged less often. Plans are changed without considering your schedule. Promises made to you become optional. At first, each incident seems insignificant. You tell yourself you're overthinking. You make excuses for everyone else's behavior. You assume it's temporary. But psychology teaches us that patterns matter far more than isolated events. One forgotten phone call means very little. 10 forgotten phone calls tell a story. One interruption is an accident. Constant interruptions reveal a habit. One broken promise may be understandable. Repeated broken promises reveal priorities. The danger isn't noticing one small sign. The danger is ignoring dozens of them until disrespect becomes the new normal. Emotionally intelligent people pay attention to patterns rather than isolated events. They don't become suspicious of everyone, nor do they immediately assume bad intentions. Instead, they quietly observe. They ask themselves, is this becoming a pattern? Have I communicated my expectations? Am I accepting something that conflicts with my values? These questions create awareness before resentment takes over. Because by the time respect has completely disappeared, rebuilding it often becomes much more difficult. The practical lesson is not to become hypervigilant. It's to become intentional. Notice what people repeatedly do, not just what they occasionally say. Notice whether your boundaries are consistently honored. Notice whether your kindness is appreciated or simply expected. Notice whether your presence is valued or merely convenient. Awareness gives you choices, and choices allow you to protect your dignity before it quietly slips away.
In conclusion, if there's one idea to remember from today's video, let it be this: people rarely wake up one morning and decide to stop respecting you. More often, respect fades through the small behaviors that are repeated day after day. The boundaries you don't defend, the standards you don't uphold, the promises you don't keep, the approval you constantly chase, the conversations you avoid, the emotions you allow others to control. None of these moments seem important on their own, but together, they shape the story people believe about you. The encouraging news is that the same principle works in your favor. Just as respect is lost gradually, it can also be rebuilt gradually. Every calm boundary you enforce, every promise you keep, every confident decision you make, every moment you choose self-respect over people-pleasing, every time you respond instead of react, you begin rewriting that story. Not through force, not through intimidation, but through consistency. Because genuine respect cannot be demanded, it cannot be manipulated, and it cannot be borrowed from status or popularity. It is earned through repeated actions that quietly communicate who you are and what you stand for. Remember, the most respected people are not those who try to control others. They are the ones who have learned to master themselves. And once you master yourself, something remarkable happens. The people who truly value you begin to draw closer. Those who only benefited from your lack of boundaries begin to drift away. And for the first time, you're no longer surrounded by people who simply like having access to you. You're surrounded by people who genuinely respect you. If this video gave you a new perspective on human behavior, emotional intelligence, and the hidden psychology of respect, then you're exactly where you belong. Subscribe to the Silent Power Code, where we explore the invisible forces that shape relationships, influence, confidence, and personal growth. Until next time, remember this: respect isn't something you ask for, it's something your daily behavior quietly teaches the world to give you.